Security camera watchers, what is your yikes? He probably wanted nobody else to see that moment you've seen over the monitor. I once lived in a building whose front doors had a panel of glass on either side. One day my phone went off while heading toward the door, and as I wasn't paying attention, instead of going through the door I walked into one of the glass panels. I was so unaware of what I was doing that I didn't even slow down and smash the glass with both my head and knee as they hit it. I fell backwards into the ground, flailing and swearing. When I got up nobody was around, so I fled the scene. Fast forward 2 weeks later, and I'm in the elevator with the building handyman. I had been avoiding the front door since the incident because I didn't want to have to pay for the repair. As we are going down he turns to me and asks, "So, how bad did it hurt when you walked into that panel?" I laughed and so did he. He said normally it would have been a terrible thing to have to fix, but watching the video of it all happening made it worthwhile. Definitely not something I wanted anyone else to see. Sometimes I do weird things at the cameras, just so they can go home and tell that story. And most often nobody watches that in the security control, and a lot of that goes unnoticed. At the least the camera has a story to tell his friends. Used to be a security guard and this is mostly true. When I wasn't out walking around on patrol I would be sitting at the desk playing Borderlands with the pals. Thing is, the camera monitor was very in my line of sight, so anytime I saw movement, I would glance over cause it was so close to the games on my laptop. It's gotten to the point that I don't even need the cameras. I turn my head into cameras and whisper, "I see you up there, just watching me," with my hands behind my back. Why don't you pick an unsecured IP cam from somewhere in the world and find your own drama to watch? Instacam is great for that. Here's a random warehouse in Japan, live stream. Potentially the best contribution to this thread. I always knew that most wireless security cams were insecure and easily accessible, but I couldn't have possibly imagined they were this accessible. I found penguins in Japan, and birds in an aviary of some kind in the Netherlands. The ones in my town were just someone's yard, and it is the middle of the night here. Shodden.io my man, Shodden.io. Make an account, use previous user searches to turn up thousands of unsecured cams. Not a watcher, but I was being watched. I was trying to learn how to do a front flip in my front yard. My dad was on a business trip, nobody else was home, and we lived on a quiet street. So I went to front yard, tried, and failed. This repeated 3 times till I gave up and decided to learn in a gym. My dad gets home and asks me, "What were you doing in the front yard? We have 2 security cameras. I see you start to run, then nothing. There was a dead zone, and then I see you lying on your back. What the heck were you doing?" Had a guy get overexcited while taking photos of women without them knowing. Found a spot that he thought was quiet, ended up being directly under a PTZ. He then bashed one out through his trouser pocket, leaving a wet patch on the front of his tan-colored trousers. When he was done, he then sheepishly made his way out of the premises, into the arms of waiting police officers. Oh, and the quiet area ended up being the kids' apartment. This is pretty unrelated, but I just want to say that there is a Plato's Closet in Virginia Beach that has a camera pointed directly into both of the dressing rooms. I complained months ago, and it's still there. If you didn't know, Plato's Closet sells used clothing, and I would say the vast majority of the people that go there are 12 to 17-year-old girls. A group of local juggalos were kicking a hacky sack in an area of the park well known for narcotic sales. The leader of this little gang and a minion both took a wild kick at an errant sack, the leader taking the minion's kick square in the nards. Leader guy dropped into the fetal position, tears flowing freely. Minion stood about howling in delight. Video gold. I work at a bowling alley. Normally we don't have someone watching the monitors, but they are always recording. A few weeks before I started working, a dude managed to knock himself out using the punching game. He went to hit the punching bag and he missed, tripped, then hit his head, and knocked himself out cold. He was fine, but everyone who works there has seen the footage. I work summers at a building in New York City and regularly watch the cameras to keep an eye on contractor and just the building, and one time saw a resident who was pretty elderly and had a wife start aggressively making out with a younger woman in the elevator. He passed and his wife now has the apartment in a very nice neighborhood in Manhattan, and not sure she ever found out. I once saw an older gentleman walking around talking to a few of my co-workers. He then got real still and stood in place for about a minute. Afterwards he shook his pant leg and made a beeline for the door. Turns out he was shaking turds out of his pants. One of my co-workers who had kids cleaned it up, no big deal. Bless her. Watched a dude trying to break up with his girlfriend for nearly an hour. It was great. Dear, I need some space. I think we should see other peer Steven. No. Visible confusion. Pretty much. Every time he tried to talk, she hugged him and started talking over him. He stood there and just accepted it. Was working the evening shift of the front desk once. Girl goes up the elevator wearing a coverall. Reaches between her legs. Gets a good scratch in. Pulls her hand out. Inspects it closely. Puts it in mouth. She noticed the camera at the very last second. Her jaw dropped lol. It wasn't bad, but I did watch a guy have an epic air guitar solo for like 10 minutes while hiding from my responsibilities at work. Once dude was pushing 70 and always acted like a hardus, but apparently is totally down to have a concert with his imaginary friends on the clock. Well, this one guy was stuffing iPhones in his backpack. He probably didn't want to be seen, because when I went to talk to him, he started running away SMH. Where did that happen? How can you just casually steal iPhones like it's apples? My dad told me about how a little kid groped a mannequin for 20 minutes. It's true, I was the little kid. It's true, I was the mannequin. Come back, I miss you. It is true, I was the mannequin. Don't normally watch it for work, but one time a full-timer was moving on to a new job, so the managers found a couple instances of him wiping out on his bike in spectacular ways as came into work for the goodbye party. I'm working in that branch, and at like 2 AM I saw two guys in a corner sticking each other's hands in their butts. Lol, the whole hand. Most disgusting CCTV moment in my 23 years of life. Dude at the factory took an early lunch and walked behind a dumpster, and about 2 minutes later walked about 5 feet out from behind it and collapsed. Don't do Herian, kids. I watched a nice looking girl start dancing for a vid on her phone while I was at my friend's dad's convenience store. The moment she noticed the camera, she got very embarrassed. I walked into an automatic sliding garage door in my parking lot at work yesterday. My first thought was that someone upstairs was probably having a chuckle. On the other side, I once did the choreography to Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious while in an escape room while they watched on the camera. Probably the guys that lost their jobs because they were smoking crack meth in their car whilst on break. They had a bad day. Early morning had a cyclist ride into the boom gate at full speed. Was a good laugh, he was alright, and blamed the sun in his eyes lol. Saw my shift manager slip and fall outside. He was fine, but we got a kick out of watching the tape on repeat. A really abrasive executive totally getting sprayed by a skunk. Saw a chicken walk up the side of a tree at 2 AM.